say a few words if you go.
Yeah.
No questions.
Nobody here.
No, from the commission.
I'm not good at
10 years ago,
repeat after me.
by moving from our
I've done this
first
thing so
home
many times,
into another home and keeping
Yeah,
it.
that's what I'm trying to do.
And then
Handy, so in case I have to
got
look
another
down and
one,
read it.
and, you know,
Because there's like
kinda
one sentence
build
where
it
it's
out.
like,
Just some, you know,
Yeah.
some
and the
things manageable, I manage it
Constitution of
myself.
the State of California.
You can get property managers just if you like.
That's probably a good
But we're
idea.
gonna get it one
But it's a
sentence at
great
a
way to
time,
like, see,
right? I can't,
Like I don't have a, whatever it is, like the 5.0, whatever, the college.
All right, we're ready to start here. We're going to start by calling the regular meeting of the Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services Commission for February 5th to order. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Nate Eckler.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Chair Price,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Hargrove, Commissioner Ahmad, Commissioner Eckler,
Here.
Commissioner Jans,
Here.
Commissioner Reed, Commissioner Sandoval, and alternate Commissioner Horwitz.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Anyone wishing to address the commission should fill out a request to speak form and present it to the clerk prior to completion of the staff presentation. We're going to start with General Administration Function Part 1, 1A, the Oath of Allegiance for Public Officers, read today to us by Mayor Christopher Cabald.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm here to administer the oath and to welcome you to service for those of you who are new, and to thank all of you, including those of you who are returning, for your continued volunteer service on behalf of the city. So if you would, please stand and raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Nate Eckler,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I will take this obligation freely
that I will take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations. I'm very grateful, and I know the City Council is as well, for your agreement to serve on the commission. This was the most popular commission for residents of West Sacramento asking to serve on and volunteering to serve, and for good reason. This has been a period of tremendous activity and accomplishment in the world of parks, recreation, and intergenerational services. For those of you from the capital world, I normally say we don't spend a lot of time on policy making. We mostly just do things although we do a long-range parks master plan, that's not more important than the father-daughter dance. The actual delivery of services and activities are the bread and butter of what the city's about. And yet, over the last year or two in particular, there have been some major initiatives and accomplishments out of this commission and the city in the domain that you're working in. The most obvious is the adoption of the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, which is the guidepost for the next generation of investments in a coherent, holistic way for the community that promotes activity, healthy living, healthy neighborhoods, and open space, and the stewardship of the environment, commitment to all the things that we're trying to do for young people, old folks, and everyone else in this city. That was a major undertaking, and it represents one of the most progressive parks master plans in the state, and is already actively underway. So that's been a major task. At the ground level, whether it's Memorial Park and the significant work that's been undertaken there to reach a viable, workable plan that's going to both expand opportunities for every child, including young people with disabilities, and improve the quality of the experience for all children and families, and support the work in the health of the neighborhood. A major step forward, and thanks to Commissioner Jans for his work in that process. To Bright Park, and some of the most significant investments that have begun there, and a path forward for significant improvements there, along with continued discussions and work with the school district around even more facilities that we will operate jointly with them. Some significant work on trails throughout the city. The Sycamore Trail that you'll, if you're not aware of, is a major priority for the city and for the school district in the center of the city, but also the massive levee project that is underway and almost done in Southport is opening up a historic amount of land and opportunity for trails and open space, which the city is already seeking grant funds and other support in order to begin to activate. So some major opportunities there. In one of the most innovative public-private partnerships the city's undertaken, the Clutterwall climbing trees, the forest in Southport is also on docket. The activation of the southern end of the Riverwalk, where the barn and all the public art has been a massive success as well. The goats are under the jurisdiction of this commission, are some of the examples in the domain of the Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services, and much more to come in the coming year as well in those areas and others. You have the opportunity to work with a really fantastic department. Our Department of Parks and Recreation is second to none. And we have a great team across all the domains. Having said that, this is not the Parks and Recreation Department commission. and the work of this commission spans a wide variety of project areas. And so, and two important ones have been the city's work with AARP on age-friendly initiatives. This will be hard to believe if you are not already in the scope of it. West Sacramento is among the top dozen cities in the entire planet, according to AARP and the World Health Organization, for its age-friendly work. So when we say intergenerational services, that portfolio within this commission's work is stewarding that. Over the last 2 years, this commission and all the commissions collaborated on the development of an age-friendly action plan, which the City Council approved last year. And every commission has a significant stake in that because whether it is the affordable and accessible housing, or the ability for folks of all ages to be able to cross the street on a single stoplight, simple initiatives in the other domains of the commissions, it's this commission that is the center point of that age-friendly action plan. And so, in addition to coordinating with others, I would certainly urge you to live that mission in the spirit that's in it. And that work has been principally coordinated through the city manager's office. And then finally, the West Sacramento Home Run, which includes universal preschool, universal college savings accounts, digital badges, and paid internships for high school students, free community college, and then soon scholarships as well, is the other end of the intergenerational services that is within this commission. And that is also stewarded principally out of the city manager's department with a new team of staff that are working on the Home Run program. So it will, I encourage you, and as we also encourage our department staff, even though it's not those are not within the direct operating domain of the Parks and Recreation Department, they're absolutely essential to the work of this commission, and the council and the community are depending on your advice. Those are two areas, aging and kids, in which West Sacramento is both well known for its innovations. These are very critical topics given our demographics, but it's a lot of brand new work. And so the checkpoints and the common sense and the new ideas are going to be really, really critical. So this is a commission with a big portfolio, and you've got a lot of work ahead of you, but a lot of exciting projects on the way. I will tell you one last thing, and that is that the City Council holds its annual retreat Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week. And when that is complete, I'll be back with you one more time during this 2-year session in order to brief you on the new strategic plan that outlines some of the key policy and management priorities for the city over the coming 2 years. If you have any last-minute, ideas or initiatives that you want us to consider in that process, please let me know offline at the commission. But that's where we determine, okay, of all the gazillion great ideas that we and you and community members and our staff have, what are we actually going to do, and how are we going to make sure that we're doing strategically over the upcoming year. And the domain of this commission is going to be centerpiece to a lot of that work. So we'll let you know more about that later. But as I say, if you have additional things, you want to shoot me an email or a note, or drop me a line otherwise before Thursday, that would be great. Welcome to the commission. Thanks for your service.
Thank you. All righty. Item 1B, introduction of the commissioners. I think we're just going to go left to right from the front here, starting with Commissioner Reed. Tell us a little about yourself, and tell us a little about yourself. Introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm,
Microphone, please. Just push that button, gray button on the
here?
bottom. Green light will turn on. and then
yay.
Remember, we're on TV.
Okay.
There's tens of people watching.
I've lived in West Sacramento since 2015. I'm a resident of Broderick. I really enjoy my community there. A lot of very caring and engaged neighbors. And I was formerly working in the California State Senate as a chief of staff. And one of the activities in the closing years of my senator's term was to be the consultant to the Senate Select Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care. So I have a long standing interest that's both personal and policy oriented for delivering services and long-term care to the aging in a age-in-place manner. And I particularly like the approach of this commission to integrate the parks and recreation and outdoor activity and healthy living and intergenerational interaction, because I think those are all key to a healthy and sustainable community. So I hope I can make a contribution from this seat.
Thank you. Commissioner Eckler.
My name is Nate Eckler. I've been a West Sacramento resident for 32 years now, probably going on 33. Live in the Westmore Oaks area, but I've lived pretty much around most areas of West Sacramento in my time of being here. The only area that I've not had the opportunity to live in is the Broderick area, but I've spent quite a bit of time out there in my years of being here, here with my family, and actually have 2 kids in our River City High School right now, and utilizing some of the programs that we have in our community, especially as the home run program is emerging, and I have kids going into college soon. That's certainly near and dear to my heart, but I've had the benefit of working with several youth groups around the area. Currently working to lead our jazz band program over at River City High School. In our nonprofit there, we raised about $30,000 to send that group out to New Orleans about a year and a half ago, and that was very, very cool. But I've been coaching and utilizing and working with a lot of these programs over here in my years of being here in West Sacramento, and this is certainly something that's near and dear to my heart, and look forward to working to shape parks in our hometown for years to come.
Thank you. I'm Greg Price, been on the Parks Commission here since 2009. In the city, either working or living since 1994. Live in Bridgeway Lakes area, so kind of represent the south tip of the city, if you will. But a lot of it is my involvement in the Parks part started, and there's a little story behind that, is that we used to be the Parks Commission, and then we had the Aging Commission, and we had the Youth Commission, and there were 3 separate entities. And we found there was a lot of duplication going on, so we were working at, can we merge those commissions? And it's been really interesting to see kind of that parks thing where you always just thought of parks as where can kids go play? But then you think about how can everyone go play there? How can everyone use that park? So looking at that a little differently and making sure that we're aware that there are different needs for different age groups. And as we did more of the demographic studies, seeing how the aging population and the youth population, like the mayor said, were the 2 biggest parts of that. So being able to really think about how everybody does something and not really think about I have kids. I'm not thinking about this or how my kids are going to do it, but it's how everybody's going to be able to do it, if that makes sense. Commissioner Jans.
My name is David Jans. I've been a resident of West Sacramento since 2002. My wife and I moved here then, and we loved it. We continue to live here now. I've always had a passion for the community that I live in, and have spent some early time volunteering, teaching computers to seniors way back when there was a senior center over in the other area of town. I've spent more of my recent time serving as a board member for the West Sacramento Little League, which brought me to know the Parks Department people. Built a relationship with them on the Memorial Park ADA renovations, and that has been a extremely joyful experience. We've come a long way together on that, and we're really proud of what we've done there. I'm excited to see the park be available to everyone in the community. I think that's something that got a little bit shadowed, but it became a really exciting thing. I'm looking forward to potentially next year when it opens, trying to bring in maybe even a challenger division to come play at the new park, and quite frankly, I don't know of any other park that's going to look the way that Memorial will and serve people with challenges that we can allow them to be a part of that as well. So I'm really excited about that. I also have a passion for the outdoors, so I'm excited about the trails and everything else going on in West Sacramento. I'm a member of the Washing Out Board Club. So I like to spend time out there at the port with my family and show them how to fish and have fun in the water. I have a couple kids who go to school here. They're involved in music and local sports, and so I'm excited to continue my service to the community.
Thank you. I'm Sasha Horwitz. I'm now in my, I guess we can call it my second year as the alternate commissioner on the Parks and Intergenerational Services Commission. I have a young child, and he is a big proponent of parks and slides and playgrounds and jungle gyms. And my wife and I live in the Southport area. And so we're particularly interested in making sure that the city continues to be a livable environment for him and other young families, especially thinking about how a city develops and how you make sure to preserve the livability and the walkability of the city, and keeping the pace of development reasonable with the needs of what what families need, what we need in terms of fresh air and trails and chances to see rabbits hopping through the open spaces. And so I hope to continue to be a service to the commission and to my community, and to do that for years to come.
Thank you. So item 1C is the selection of commission chairs and vice chairs. We're actually going to table that until the next meeting, when all of the full commission can be here. We have 3 absent members today. So moving on to item 1D, presentation by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. The commission is prohibited by law from acting or from discussing on items not on the agenda brought to them at this time. Do we have any speaker cards? No. No speaker cards. Come on, Shelley. Item 1E, commission communications. Is there anything from our new commission or new parks director on that?
Commissioner Price, I will have an update under the director's report, but if there are any updates that the commission members have based on meetings that they've attended in the recent past, this would be a good opportunity for them to share.
So I don't recall us having anything since the October meeting, so I think that's a no from discussion of other sort of concurrent committees. Now onto the consent agenda, item 2, consideration of the approval of the October 2nd and October 16th meetings of the commission. Are there any comments on, we need a motion to approve the minutes.
Moved.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Eckler and seconded by Commissioner Horwitz. Any discussion on that? No. All in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. All right. That's done. Regular agenda, item 3, consideration of the 2019 Community Development Block Grant funding to be received by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I have a last name, Whitaker.
Good evening.
Sorry.
All right, so good evening. I'm here tonight to announce the city's availability of the 2019 Community Development Block Grant funding, and to solicit comments from the commission regarding possible goals for 2019 funding. So I'll begin with a brief presentation on an overview of the CDBG program, and then I'll be available to answer any questions you may have. So CDBG funds must be used to meet at least one of these 3 national objectives. These national objectives include benefit to low and moderate income persons or households, elimination of slums and blight, and urgent need. It is important to note that a grantee's yearly allocation, 70% of that allocation has to go towards benefiting low to moderate income households or individuals. So jurisdictions receiving CDBG funding are required to create what's called a 5-year consolidated plan. A 5-year consolidated plan will outline goals to be accomplished within that 5-year period. So the city's current consolidated plan, 2016 to 2020, identified 4 goals. Those 4 goals were identified or divided into high priority goals and low priority goals. Those high priority goals included reducing the incidence and impact of homelessness, achieving goals identified within Washington Realized, and the low priority goals included strengthening economic opportunities for lower income households and furthering fair housing. So for each year of the 5-year consolidated plan, jurisdictions are required to create what's called an annual action plan. An annual action plan will detail and prescribe how the city's yearly allocation will go towards furthering the 4 goals that were identified in the larger 5-year consolidated plan. So we are currently within the 4th year of our city's consolidated plan, and we are at the beginning stages of developing the 2019 annual action plan. So for 2019, the city anticipates receiving an allocation that was similar to last year's allocation, which was about $446,000. When you minus 20% of that yearly allocation for general admin and planning, and you anticipate and add the anticipated program income that we are hoping to receive during the year, we're thinking we might have about $487,000 available for this year's funding. So tonight's recommended action is that the commission provides staff feedback in terms of which goals you would like us to focus on when we when we start drafting the annual action plan. And again, those 4 goals were identified in the 5-year consolidated plan. So they were reducing incidence and impact of homelessness, achieving goals identified in Washington Realized, furthering fair housing, and strengthening economic opportunities for lower income households. So this concludes my presentation, but if you have any questions, I'm available to answer those. Thank you.
Any questions? So start with Shasha on the end.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's an estimated $130,000 from program receipts. Can you tell me where those sources may be coming from?
Yeah, so the city is new to entitlement CDBG funding, so now we receive our allocations directly from the federal government. Prior to that, so 2015 and prior, we were a state recipient of CDBG funding, and so a lot of the activities that we used with those state funds were we did first-time homebuyer programs, so loans. We did home rehab programs. So a lot of those receipts are coming from those programs that we use state CDBG funds for. So it would be like a payoff of a loan or payments from the loan.
Anyone, Nate, got a question?
On the, so you have the forecasted dates for the 2019 annual action plan is still TBD. Do we know when that might be delivered or a recommendation on that?
In terms of our allocation amount?
No, as far as just the, so certainly there was planned goals for focus for the high priority and low priority. When do those goals kind of align and become effectuated, if you will, as actual goals?
Right, so those goals were identified in the 5-year consolidated plan, and so that was for every year we look to see which goals would we like to focus on for this specific year. So in terms of when we will be able to act on those, so if you look at the staff report, there was an outline on dates. We're hoping to get our annual action plan approved in June, so prior to the year starting in July. So depending upon the activity that we choose, it's just whenever we would be ready to implement those.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Questions?
I have a few questions, and first of all, the overall plan seems very comprehensive and complete. And while you've
Commissioner Reed, can you turn your mic on?
Sorry,
That's okay.
I'm not used to it yet. Sorry, I'll get there. It seems even though you've identified some as high priority and some as low priority, that you've actually been active on all fronts. And of course, there are funds and opportunities flowing in each of the 4 areas from different sources in terms of funding and other activities that are going on either at the county or the state level. And so I'm wondering first if in terms of things like the No Place Like Home initiative and new monies coming in that direction, what you see relative to these four goals and some of the emerging opportunities with the housing, the new housing funding and the homeless housing and wraparound services funding, how you see that interacting with the community grant funds and whether an influx of funding from other sources or activities in other jurisdictions, the larger jurisdictions, is going to impact the city's need or capacity to address those issues and perhaps even release resources or staff energy to address some of the lower priority areas.
Yeah, so our 2017 and our 2018 allocation we used for the permanent supportive housing project. So the permanent supportive housing project is an 85-unit housing, multifamily housing development project that is in support of, it's for permanent supportive housing, so helping homeless individuals or those currently at risk of homelessness. So with the 2017 and 2018 allocation, we have dedicated just over $1 million towards that project. And that project applied for the No Place Like Home funding, and we applied for about $4.9 million. So to answer your question specifically, we always try to ensure that whatever funding that we put towards projects, we can see if we can match that or use those funds as a leverage to go after additional funding. So we are definitely doing that with the permanent supportive housing project and with No Place Like Home funding as well. Also, too, I'd like to mention that the first project that we funded in 2016 was for the Riverwalk Trail project. So that project just received a SACOG grant for, I believe, $2.4 million. So again, we're trying to go towards projects or use our funding towards projects that are very competitive, so that way we can leverage the available funding that's available in other jurisdictions.
Dave, got any questions for us?
Could you go back to the slide that showed the allocation of the last 3 years?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I just wanted to make a correction. It was $2.3 million. This one? I'm sorry.
No, one more. You're there, right here.
Okay.
So I noticed that, and it's not in the documents that I believe, but I just noticed that the last 2 years, the same areas were, part of this consolidated plan, whereas the first year it was focused on the Riverwalk Trail. And in the documents we received, there was an area regarding public comment as far as providing education, adult education, and job skills to the community. And I believe it correlates to one of the lower priorities here. So I'm just curious if we continue to allocate based on the last 2 years, would continuing to do that focus on some of those lower priorities, specifically adult education and job skills, which would provide more opportunities for people in the community? Or would you recommend maybe a shift of allocations?
Right, so it would be what you're recommending to staff, what goals that you would like us to focus on. But yes, the low priority of strengthening economic opportunities for lower income households, that is one that we have not funded using entitlement funding. We did offer micro enterprise assistance and grants using our state CDBG funding, but as you pointed out, yes, we have not used our entitlement funds for that. So that is something that we could definitely consider if that's what you would like staff to look at.
I would personally, yeah.
Thank you.
So I think a lot of this is a reminder of that the funds that we're doing things with come from so many different sources. So you talked about the state CDBG funds, the federal HUD ones, and how many little things that have to get funded from that. I mean, I was just reading through the report, and it was like, how do we eliminate instances of lead-based paint as a way to spend grant money? All those little things have to happen. So it's taking those big picture things and having the 5 different opportunities for comment from economic development, from Parks and Rec, from public comment, city council, all those opportunities to think of all the things and help us prioritize what we want the kind of big ticket items to be. Because then we start using whatever's kind of left over or leveraging those funds to get that grant money from other places. So it's like we get federal money coming in, and we use that as the matching funds to get the SACOG grant. So that's exactly what I would support doing. And then you, like I said, you fill in those little blanks with the extra, 420,000 with all those other little things that have to happen. But you're not going to do a $2.3 million project using a $400,000 HUD grant, right? So you have to be able to leverage that money to make it work for you. So I think that's a great idea, and that's a great direction you guys are taking. Any other comments, questions for
Actually, I do.
Amber?
I really agree with Commissioner Jantz on the job training. That's another area. In reading the report, I noted that it indicated that we had more jobs than could be filled by West Sacramento residents. And I know it doesn't necessarily fall within this commission's purview, but in terms of the housing needs, and then the percentage of income that is being dedicated to housing and the need for well-paying jobs. I noted an emphasis on some youth employment, but I think the adult employment area I didn't find as much in. And I wondered if there's been any effort in terms of matching the needed skills with the businesses that are in a growth mode. And through WIOA funding or other economic development funding, whether there is some more attention that could be paid to adult education and career pathways that will enable people to afford their homes. And the question I had too was, regarding evaluation of programs. Obviously, we want to keep spending and doing what's working and stop doing what's not working. And I was interested in the evaluation component of the program and kind of the metrics you use in terms of evaluating whether something is worthwhile pursuing or perhaps scaling up. And I was interested in the enterprise program and what the outcome had been of the effort there, the micro entrepreneurship.
Yeah, definitely. So with the micro enterprise grant, the micro enterprise program, I believe did that in 2015 and 16, and a little bit in 2017. Unfortunately, I wasn't there during that time, but I can try to recall. It was a very successful program. We had a lot of attendees that would come. I believe classes, the technical assistance was offered in English and Spanish, and so we had two separate technical assistances provided. And then for those individuals who completed the classes, we would offer matching grants to help their business. And so we did have, if I recall, we had about from 2016, perhaps up to 5 grants that we provided. Yes, in terms of the success, yes, we think that was definitely a successful program. And that's definitely something that we could look at again using federal funding.
In terms of the metrics that you use accompanying the goal setting, how does that work in terms of, do we follow those businesses? Do we know how many are thriving today? What is the longitudinal scope of our evaluation process?
Correct. So usually we use the metrics that HUD requires us to use. We can always use additional metrics on top of that. I believe for micro enterprise, it was how many employees were hired that fit that low income bracket. And then you had to show that those businesses did hire employees who fit within to benefit the low to moderate income persons or households. And again, the business also had to qualify as a low to moderate income household. But yes, so it would be number of jobs that were provided, and then just the number of attendance of people who completed the courses. But in terms of following up, like a longitudinal study, no, we haven't done anything like that, but that's always something that we can definitely take a look at.
Thank you.
One last question. Certainly the Riverwalk Bike Trail is a success because now that you're able to extend that from, what you've seeded off here and you've matched in with other potential SACOG grants and things to go and expand that pathway. Of these initiatives that are being put out here, have any work been, identified to what might be a potential of something that we can go and face, for extending that dollar further, right? So, I mean, where we might be able to get matching resources or other grant opportunities to, further stretch that $400,000, certainly as before. One of the ones now you're looking at an additional 2.3 million based upon, the seed work that you did with this. So is that something that, work's been looked at here just as from an opportunity sense of what might be a further stretch later on?
Yeah, our goal right now that we're really focusing on is the permanent supportive housing project. A lot of funding has come downstream for projects such as that. So we've been really putting our attention on that. That project is still in need of funding. We're looking about at a $2 million to $3 million gap on that project. So again, this year's allocation, next year's can also go towards that project if that's the direction the commission would like to see or recommend, and we can definitely take a look at that. But in terms of any other projects, we haven't looked at that right now, but we are in the process of doing that at this time, so.
Thank you.
I think like to piggyback off that, like what you said, you have $63 million worth of projects that need to get done, and we have to figure out how to get the funding for that, and this is just a small piece of that step. So thanks for all your hard work in putting together the 150-page document, and I remind everyone in the audience and watching at home that they can get that on the city's website, download that and read it for themselves and be prepared for the next public comment, which would be at the council meeting, right? Oh no, there's public comment going to be in March. So we'll have three more times to be able to hear this from you. Yes. Not us, but the city. Any other comments before we cut you loose? All right, thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item 4, workshop on the Parks and Open Space Master Plan update from the Director of Parks and Recreation.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you, Commissioners. Tracy Michael. This item tonight is a continued discussion from last October, which seems so far away now, regarding the capital improvement plan for the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, as well as a funding strategy. We did share some information with City Council in December. We've worked to incorporate some of that feedback and build on it. So this is kind of part 2. And I know for new commission members, this is a lot of information. I'm happy to, to direct you to some additional material offline if you want to take a look at some of the items that have been presented earlier. All right. So the objective of the presentation tonight is to go over the capital improvement plan and the funding strategy. But what's new from our last commission meeting is that I want to talk a little bit more about the park impact fee and next steps for getting the plan, the draft plan, completed hopefully by March. That's our target date right now. And then hopefully by April or May, we'd actually have a final Parks and Open Space Master Plan. There we go. In developing the capital improvement plan, what we did is we divided projects and costs into 3 different buckets. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the 3 different buckets because there are different requirements and funding strategies associated with the different buckets. So the first bucket is what we refer to as our sustainable bucket. This is about our existing facilities, our existing assets. It's mostly life cycle replacement. We have over 38 parks, and we have a recreation center and a community center and a boathouse facility and a Club West facility. And so this is about things like play equipment replacement, resurfacing parking lots, replacing shade structures. No asset lasts forever, so we've tried to take a really hard look at our facilities, and some of them are older facilities and require a lot of maintenance, and sometimes you get to the point where it's just more effective to replace items than it is to continually try to maintain them and repair them. The next bucket is our expanded services bucket. So this is again, about our existing facilities, but it's about adding features to our existing facilities so that we can expand the recreation experience on site. So a good example of an enhancement would be, or an expanded service would be, adding an inner loop path or a walking trail within an existing park site. It could be adding a shade structure over a play structure to extend the playtime of that play structure, or it can be adding a sand volleyball court in a park right now that currently exists, so that we have a new amenity that meets the needs of the community and an existing facility. And then the third bucket is visionary, and this is really about new park development. It can also be about a major overhaul of an existing park. So Bright Park is a good example of a visionary project. Almost a decade ago now, the community helped to develop the Bright Park master plan. We've tried to implement it in phases. Completing that master plan would be considered a visionary project because it really is a complete overhaul of the balance of the park that hasn't been improved yet. Our 10-year CIP development assumptions are that it must be financially viable. The last thing we wanted to do was spend the time and resources developing a plan that we didn't feel like we could implement over the next 10 years. We also took a hard look at projects that are likely to be implemented within the 10-year window. So we know that development will continue in the Bridge District. Hopefully we'll get started in Pioneer Bluffs area. We'll have more infill development in the Washington neighborhood, a lot of new development in Southport, but it's not all going to be built out in 10 years. And so we've tried to focus on realistically what might be developed in 10 years. And then responsive to the data that we've collected. So over the past year, we've had a variety of survey and outreach efforts that have provided us information on unmet needs in the community and also some emerging trends. So I just want to highlight some of those for some of the new commissioners that may not have heard about this, but the feedback that we got from the community is trails are really important. Trails are the #1 priority, and it speaks to, I think, what the commission has been saying and what the mayor said about trails really work for all age groups. Passive recreation, transportation, safe routes to school, getting to a park site, getting to a neighbor's house. So we know that it's a priority to continue to grow our trails network and expand our trails network. The other emerging trend was economic development through park development and vice versa. So there's a synergy between our waterfront, our places to recreate, and development, and being smart about how we move forward with both efforts in an area so that we can create those synergies. And sometimes park development might lead economic development, and sometimes you might have the economic development first, but really making sure that we're working together, because there's also a lot of different funding resources available when you do that. The third piece was our rec center business plan update. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary at the Recreation Center. You all received invites to that. It was a wonderful event Paul and his staff put on. And it's 10 years old. When it was built 10 years ago, it served several of the functions that it continues to serve today, but since then we've also built a community center, and we need to continue to look at how we can invest in our recreation center so that it remains competitive and functional and meets the needs of our community. The fourth item was partnerships with the school district, and the mayor touched on that as well. We have a tremendous partnership with the school district in terms of our parks facilities. We have multiple joint use facilities. We want to continue to explore opportunities to expand recreation by continuing to work with the school district. And so I would like to just note here that the school district and the board has taken some actions to start looking at repositioning some of the school sites. We are excited and committed to working with the school district, but everything you're going to see tonight doesn't make any assumptions about any school district properties that might be currently being considered for repositioning, or it doesn't really have funding associated with that either. So if those opportunities become something that we can pursue within this 10-year window, that'll have to be factored in, and we'll be revisiting this very frequently. And then the last item was developing sound financial strategies, building advocacy for our parks and recreation system, and making sure that we are exploring partnership opportunities so that we can leverage the resources we have to continue to not only have, beautiful facilities, but also to support our programming as well. So the other few items I want to mention about the 10-year CIP is that we did work really hard internally. We had an interdepartment team of staff that helped to make sure that we had really good information incorporated into the document, that we have consistency with all of the other planning efforts that are going on. I did mention Washington Realized, the Bridge District, Pioneer Bluff, all of the developments in Southport, just to make sure that what we're incorporating into our planning process is consistent with what's already been planned. So getting to the first bucket, the sustainable projects bucket, this is a summary slide. Right now, based on the long list of projects that we have in this bucket, remember this is about our existing facilities, primarily life cycle replacement, we have a 10-year estimated total project cost of approximately $22 million. Of that amount, half of it is for debt service for our recreation center. So just important to note that we have a partnership with the school district on that property. As part of the bond issuance that the school district issued, we have a debt service obligation to the rec center. So a big chunk of that money is to cover that debt service. Another large portion of that is focused on existing park improvements, and some of the big ones are projects you've probably already heard about. What's included in this category is Memorial Park and the ADA upgrades. It's already budgeted, but we included it anyway because we're taking into account everything that's happening this year. We also have ADA upgrades required at Bright Park, so that's a big number, and that's part of that line item. And then there's just a few other larger items, but mostly we have 38 parks, and when you're handling life cycle replacement in that number of facilities over a 10-year period, it just starts to add up. We have some new park planning underway, $600,000 for Bees Lakes Habitat Restoration Plan. I will note that the numbers up here don't mean this is all new money we need to find. For a lot of these projects, we already have the funding in place, and I'm going to speak to that in just a little bit. The Bees Lakes Habitat Restoration Plan is one of those. We received full funding from the Delta Conservancy for that planning effort. And then we have some administrative costs just preparing for the next 10-year window. Our General Plan 2035 document requires us to complete a Parks and Open Space Master Plan update every 10 years. So in about year 8 of this 10-year window, we're going to need to be gearing up for the next 10-year planning effort. And so we've tried to factor in those types of planning efforts into this category. We also would love to have an urban forest management plan. We don't have one of those currently, so we've factored those in. Expanded services. So this is what can we do to our existing facilities to enhance and expand recreation opportunities. A big part of this number, $16.8 million, is focused on existing parks, a lot of shade structure replacement, or shade structures to areas that don't currently have them. Covered picnic shelters was a top priority for people in all of our survey work. They're reservable, they extend the use in a park site. We have also a lot of money, half, for trail enhancements. Those are trail expansions or improvement to trails. And then we have some improvements to our rec center. Those are probably going to be factored into the rec center business plan update that you will see separately in the coming months, but we've already tried to take some of those into account, things like adding lighting to our tennis courts so that we can have tennis in the evenings, which is real opportunity for us because we share those courts with the high school. So it gives us an opportunity in the evening for either the high school or the rec center pass holders to use. And then we have some additional money for new park planning and improvements, but most of that money is actually already anticipated to be funded through grant funding. And then the biggest bucket is the visionary bucket, almost $140 million in projects over the next 10 years. The largest portion of that 140 million is really development in Southport, with the Yarborough, River Park, and Liberty developments starting to come online. New park developments will happen as part of those projects. So that's a big part of that money. New trail development is another large line item, almost $30 million. And this is consistent with what is in the Bike Ped Trail Master Plan. So there's a lot of overlap with trails. We've worked really hard to make sure that what's in the Bike Ped Trail Master Plan is also reflected or will be reflected in the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. We have a little over 26 million identified for existing park improvements. These are primarily Bright Park, implementing the balance of the master plan, which is a very large item, over $20 million just for that. And then Heritage Oaks Park is something we've earmarked because the ropes course, as the mayor mentioned, is on its way. And once we have people on a portion of the site, the rest of the site's undeveloped, and we want to work really hard to get the balance of the site finished. So just a summary by tier of the 3 buckets. We have the sustainable, expanded, and visionary projects that total almost $179 million. I'd like to note that back in 2003, when we had our last Parks Master Plan update completed, the total value of the capital improvement projects for that effort was also about $179 million. So I think we've actually done a really good job considering how much more expensive projects are today, and it's been over 15 years of keeping the projects and the costs in line in a feasible way. So summary by project type, just another breakdown of that $179 million to give you a sense of where the money's going. Over $43 million to existing parks, $12 million existing recreation facilities, that's primarily our rec center. Almost $37 million in trail facilities, $85 million in new park development, and just under $1 million in administrative types of projects. So we actually have a very complex spreadsheet, a park-by-park spreadsheet that identifies every site, every facility, a 10-year window. We've escalated costs, and we've tried to identify when we might need to make certain improvements. And what this slide shows is a summary of where the bulk of the projects are going to be coming in over the next 10 years. And really, years 1 through 5, we're going to have about a little over $51 million worth of projects, but the bulk of that's going to occur in the later years. And we've timed those projects with grant performance periods, because you'll see in a few slides we're going to try to be very aggressive with seeking grant funding, and we're trying to be cognizant of when those performance periods are going to fall in line with our 10-year window. So most of the development happens in years 6 through 10, and most of the Southport development we're assuming happens in years 8, 9, and 10, like the very end of that 10-year window. So our funding strategy. What we did for our funding strategy was we first developed our capital improvement plan, the list of projects. And we have a list of projects that we feel is very reasonable. We've got some exciting projects built in there too. We have a re-envisioned Central Park, which is, I think a few commission meetings ago, we kind of spent a little more time on that. The repositioning, relocation of the Central Park that straddles the navigation locks and the barge canal. It's very exciting. And, a couple of big scale projects and a lot of trail projects. So we have that total CIP. Then what we did is we took a look at all the other funding sources that could potentially be available for park and trail projects. Most of those funding sources are all internal, with the exception of grant funding. We really can't identify exactly how much money we'll have in grant funding, but we've estimated what we think we might be able to get, and hopefully we'll be able to get more. We also took a look at any geographic restrictions associated with funding sources, and I'll talk about that in a minute too. But not all funding is available citywide, and so we tried to be strategic about that. And then after we did that, we looked at what's left, what's needed to be generated from our park impact fee to support the CIP. So this slide identifies the potential funding sources that we looked at. We have our general fund, we have Measure E, Measure K, Measure G. We included Measure N, but we did get feedback from council in December that even though that's a new funding source, we haven't developed policy about how we're going to use that, and so we're not making any assumptions of using any Measure N funds right now. We have the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, the EIFD, that's kind of like the new redevelopment fund for the city. CFDs are community facility districts, which offer an opportunity in very specific locations for assisting with some park enhancements, some O&M potentially. We have Prop 68. Per capita, there's a lot of different grant programs that are going to be funded with Prop 68, but the per capita is a guaranteed amount that every jurisdiction will receive, and it depends, the amount you receive depends on your size. If you're urban, if you're more rural, if you're a park district versus a city or county, we will receive about $250,000 out of that. We have, of course, our park impact fee, and we've tried to estimate what we think that's going to generate over the next 10 years based on anticipated development. We have settlement funds that we have been holding on to as part of the rivers development. We have about $2 million there that we are trying to use to leverage resources focused more on the northern part of the city. We've used them as match funding for grant applications that we haven't been successful in getting yet, so we still have that full amount left. Of course, there's grants. There's a lot of different types of grants. There are now, for the first time in many years, actual park and recreation grant programs being made available. And then there's cap and trade grant programs that trails are often a really good candidate for. And then partnerships, our council, our mayor is, have advocated for us really pursuing thinking outside of the box types of partnership opportunities to see park development happen and to provide new recreation opportunities. And then we have development projects. So for the major development projects that I've mentioned, the Bridge District, probably Pioneer Bluffs, that's not as far along yet, Liberty, River Park, Yarborough, those have development agreements attached to those projects that have already outlined the terms for a lot of the park development and the resources, and so we've captured that, but that is a funding source but specific to those project areas. So this is just an example of a mapping exercise we did. I don't have all the funding sources mapped here for you. We did that. This is just a sample of how we looked at the geographic boundaries for different funding sources. This happens to be our community facility districts, both our capital and operational districts. And so you can see on this map, all of our parks are identified, both existing and future parks. So those park sites that happen to be located in a CFD may have the potential to target some of that funding for projects in the future. This is an example of the maps highlighting the Bridge District and the Pioneer Bluff Stonelock areas, where we don't have a specific plan for the Pioneer Bluff Stonelock area yet, but we're assuming that we will have one and we'll have terms that are similar to the other larger development projects. And so this was a really helpful exercise. Our mayor and council actually asked us to do that. Our consultant had never done it before, and now that we've done it, our consultant has said that this is the new way of doing business. It just makes sense to look at how you can strategically allocate funding for park projects. There are some funding sources available citywide. General fund, of course, Measure E, Measure G, Measure K, and Measure N, as well as our Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District. So I wanted to provide this map because this shows the city, the outline of the city against the disadvantaged community map. There are a couple of different sources where you can find the disadvantaged community maps, but what's important here is The dark red areas are the areas that are most competitive in terms of disadvantaged communities and receiving funding that prioritizes disadvantaged communities. Most of the grant programs that we apply for have a disadvantaged community component. So you will get extra points in the evaluation process if your project is located in or serves a disadvantaged community. So what this map tells us is that, unfortunately, a lot of the Southport new projects aren't as competitive, but the northern portion of the city is very competitive, and we know we have opportunity up there, especially with Bright Park and in the Washington neighborhood, and even with some of the school district sites that they're thinking about repositioning right now. Well, we went to council after presenting to the Parks Commission in October, and just to check in with our current funding policy assumptions to make sure that the assumptions we were using were still accurate, and that included our general fund, facilities fund. We use that fund primarily to maintain our existing building facilities. We also try to access that fund as much as we can to support our ongoing ADA improvements. Measure K, we use Measure K for our rec center debt service payments, as well as other projects that are focused and benefit children. So we have a shade structure program right now that's been funded through Measure K. We will start placing shade structures in park facilities this year for parks that don't have them currently. Also, play structure replacement is a really good potential project for Measure K funding. Our community facility districts can help with certain park sites for life cycle replacement. Some O&M costs were applicable. Measure E, policies already in place to allocate a certain percentage of Measure E funds for trails, trail amenities, and O&M. And I do want to highlight trail amenities are really important as we continue to grow our trail network. Places for people to park, to access a trail if they're bringing their bike on their car, places for people to have shade, trash receptacles, recycling receptacles, or even if you just need to be able to communicate information to trail users. For a lot of our trails that are on levees, we have maintenance activities taking place, or portions of trail areas may be seasonally inundated. Trailhead facilities are the type of amenities that provide a great opportunity to educate our trail users about which areas are safe to use and which areas are not. And so we are working really hard to start to develop more trailhead facilities as amenities to our trails. We also asked for consideration for some new funding policy, and that is that we continue to explore the EIFD funding to contribute to park projects that promote economic development. So going back to that emerging trend, if there's a park development that can support economic development, that might be a really good fit for some EIFD funds. Transportation impact fee. We are recommending that all of our trail project costs be considered as part of the transportation impact fee. So that's a little bit of a shift from the past, but a lot of our trail projects qualify for transportation-related grant funding, and so that's something that is being looked at right now as the transportation impact fee is currently being updated. So we're using the same assumptions right now. I'm continuing to use that assumption for this effort. Our settlement funds will be for projects that improve access to recreation in the northern portion of the city and that leverage resources. Grant funding, we will aggressively pursue grant funding in order to leverage resources, and that's a variety of different grant funds. So I'm going to speak a little bit later in my director's report about Prop 68 because a number of grant programs are starting to roll out, and we're going to have a lot of work ahead of us to apply for those funds. Active transportation provides a lot of opportunities for trails and some of our trail amenities, and there are a lot of environmental grant programs out there that can help support our open space enhancements and some of our recreation. I mentioned the Delta Conservancy grant that we received to study Bees Lakes. We could also receive construction funding from that same grant program to enhance public access to the Bees Lakes area, making it a really nice passive recreation experience and for education purposes as well. So getting back to our CIP, here's the summary by tier. Our 3 buckets, almost $179 million. When we looked at all of those other funding sources and what might be available over what period of time, we started to allocate our project costs in our CIP to those funding sources. And this is something that will evolve. It's be kind of a living spreadsheet from year to year as other opportunities become available or other priorities, move to the forefront. But what it does is it identifies that there could be up to over $140 million available, and some actually are already available to help us implement our 10-year CIP. I'd like to mention that the development agreement funds on there, those are the funds that I spoke to about River Park, Yarborough, Liberty, where the Bridge District, we've already identified the funding strategies for those project areas. That's what you see in that development agreement funds line item. And some of the grant funding that we have in there, we've already received. So here's some highlights of how we have chosen to allocate projects to those funding sources. For the grant funding, we have almost $25 million identified over the 10-year period coming in from grant funds. The largest portion of that is for trails, and some of that money we've already received. And we think our trail projects are really competitive and will continue to be competitive for more grant funding. We have $8.5 million for Bright Park. That's the Prop 68 grant program that just came out this week. It's the statewide community park program. And then we have the other 2 items, Riverwalk Park and Bees Lakes. We already received those grant funds. The Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, we've targeted about $3.7 million, primarily for areas where economic development activities are taking place. So we know the Stone Lock, Pioneer Bluffs area, that's where the Central Park is going to be, and the Pioneer Bluff Trail. Those are economic development areas. And so we will work to build the synergy between recreation and economic development in that location. And then for transportation impact fee, we have almost $16 million of projects identified from that funding source. They're all trail projects. So then we looked at, okay, those are the other funding sources. What about our park impact fee? Our park impact fee right now was established in 2003 and has a 3% annual escalator. We looked at development projects that are likely to come online over the next 10 years, residential, and commercial, office, and industrial. We assumed that there are current discounts offered to certain geographic areas, and those would remain. And those discounts are half off the neighborhood park impact fee for projects that are located in the Washington neighborhood and along the West Capitol Corridor. And then we included projects that would pay your typical park impact fee, so we did not include any projects that are in development areas that already have a development agreement. So we're not including the Bridge District, we're not including a lot of those new Southport developments. It's only those projects that are coming online that are likely to pay the typical fees. And this is a snapshot, before I get to what our fees are going to generate, of other fees in the region. So our fee, at a glance, it looks like it's a really high fee. And we have been kind of questioned over the years about our fees and the potential for the fee to hinder economic development because it is a higher fee. What I wanted to point out in doing some research about what our other communities in the region are doing is that if you look at the table, there's a line item called Other Fees, and there's a number of items under that line item. Those other fees are fees that other cities or districts, jurisdictions collect that all contribute to park and trail development and open space development. We do not have those fees. So everything that we do related to our park development, it's land acquisition, it's development, it can be for trails as well, or anything that offers passive recreation in some of our open space areas. All of that comes from our park impact fee. When you look at the other fees, and I'll just use Davis as an example. Their fees are actually pretty high, their development impact fees are high, but they have Quimby fees, which are additional fees that have to be focused on land acquisition only, but it's another fee. And they estimate over $7,000 per dwelling unit for the Quimby fee. So that's every project that goes forward has that additional fee added onto it. Some jurisdictions charge their fees based on square footage. So the bigger the project, the more they pay. Some fees have a more flexible tax that is 1% of the value of the total project, and it can be spent on not only parks, but also other public facilities and trails. So the purpose of this table is just to demonstrate that you can't really compare apples to apples when you're looking at park impact fees across other cities or districts in the region. And when using our current fee, we estimate that over 10 years, it will generate almost $35 million in revenue. So $35 million in park impact fee funds that can be used primarily to expand services in our parks or on those visionary projects. Park impact fee funding is usually not used for existing facilities. It can be when you are making major upgrades to a park site. So Bright Park would qualify for this, but a lot of our other park sites don't qualify for park impact fee funding. So that means we need to look for other funding sources anyway. But it also means that that $35 million doesn't get us to the $179 million 10-year total. But that's okay because it doesn't need to. Because when we apply those other funding sources, that we've targeted, what we find in this slide is that we're almost balanced. Based on our current fee, we almost have enough money to do everything we need to do. In fact, we have a little bit of an unfunded balance as it relates to our sustainable bucket. We can't use park impact fee funds to pay for a lot of our existing facility park sites, but if we're more aggressive with grant funding, we may be able to, fill that gap. And we have a little bit of surplus right now, projected $2.3 million of additional park impact fee funds. So that's kind of a nice value to have because, number one, we don't really know what's going to be developed over the next 10 years. If we don't realize all of that development, our park impact fee revenue isn't $35 million, it's something less. If we don't receive all the grant funding we hope to get, then we may need some additional funding. If something happens in some of the other funding sources that we've identified might not be available, that gives us a little bit of a cushion. So having gone through this analysis, our recommendation is that we continue with our current park impact fee as it is, continue to monitor it year by year to see if things are changing in the market or in the construction industry that would lead us to believe that we need to look at it because we're no longer operating under the assumptions that we used for this initial analysis. The other item that I wanted to touch on, which was included in your staff report, is our project prioritization criteria. We created some draft criteria to help us identify ways that we would prioritize projects, and we developed 4 different categories. The first are immediate projects, and those are the ones that are critical for health and safety. Those are, our ADA upgrades. We are under a very strict timeline for making those improvements. Those would be a high priority item. Also, benefit-driven projects that help us meet the requirements that we set out to meet in our general plan, our land acreage goals, our amenity needs. We know we need play fields. We have opportunity-driven projects, which are projects that leverage resources and offer partnership opportunities. They might be located on a significant site or help to promote economic development opportunities. And then financial capacity, this really applies to everything as we begin to look at projects. It's something that we haven't always done in the past, but part of our analysis will be, what is it going to take us to maintain this new improvement, over the next 10 to 20 years? Because as we talked about with that sustainable bucket, once we build something, it's there, and we have to continue to maintain it. And we need to make sure we have the funding to do that. So in summary, our 10-year CIP is about $179 million. Of that amount, really 20% of the funding for that CIP would be coming from our park impact fee, based on our current fee. We have about $4.5 million of unfunded projects right now. We feel like over a 10-year period, we could work to close that gap. And we'd have to be revisiting, we would be revisiting the CIP every year anyway, but our general plan does call for us to develop a 10-year plan and to look at minor updates within the first 5 years to make sure we're on track. The other funding sources, as I mentioned, total about 79%. Our park impact fee would, under these assumptions, would continue to remain the same and be annually adjusted like it currently is. We have not factored Measure N into this at all, so as policy develops for Measure N, there could be some other opportunities. We're not assuming there are at this point. And we also don't assume any new funding sources. So those other fees that are listed in that table that other jurisdictions have, we're not assuming that we have any of those. We're not planning to introduce any new fees. And so with that, we feel like we have a pretty balanced 10-year CIP. So the next steps, right now we're working on our operational and staffing assessment. As we grow our park portfolio, we will also need to grow our staff to maintain those facilities. We're looking at that right now, what that means over the 10-year period, and our organizational capacity to actually implement all of the projects that are in our CIP. We hope to have the draft Parks and Open Space Master Plan ready for review in March, and then shortly following that, the Rec Center Business Plan update. And then if needed, based on feedback we receive, we would move forward with an update to our park impact fee. But right now, where we're at, staff's recommendation is that we continue to maintain our current fee and monitor it. That concludes my presentation. Thank you. I know it was a lot of information, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions?
I have one. Thank you for putting this all together. I know that was not trivial. But going and look at the park impact fee structure and how you had that table that, showed the other districts relative to West Sacramento. And as that's, how does West Sacramento balance out? Like, if you were to take all the fees in totality, are we under the margin? Are we in the middle of the road? Are we, if you were to just say, okay, factoring all of those fees all together and with all of the other fees, I mean, certainly, if you were to look at just the top level of it, West Sacramento, it paints a different picture. But as you said, factoring those other sources, how does that make us, match up to other districts?
Well, in some areas, we're about even.
Okay.
I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of each of those fees, though, and I know that a lot of information, a lot of history goes into each one of those fees, and that each of those jurisdictions or districts also have their own development projects with different project agreements. And so, for example, out in Rockland and Lincoln, they have a lot of development that's completely handled as part of new master plan community development that isn't even part of those fees. And there's no easy way to collect all that information. So I would say that we are in line and tracking with most of the other cities when you factor in all those other fees.
And then just one other follow-up. Our model right now does that, certainly you have very structured levels of where some of those fees are allocated to and park impact fees and all that. In adopting a different model, does that give you any more or less agility for how you would spend that money?
In terms of a funding strategy model?
Yeah, well, in the sense,
Or-
right, so I mean, certainly there's only certain levels of fees that, would be relative where you would spend in certain areas where, and help filling the gaps.
Right. So some of the fees are pretty prescriptive on how you can use them and where you can use them. The grant funding is the one area that we have no control over. And you never know how competitive your project will be because it's always relative to the other applications received.
Sure.
So a project one year that might not be competitive and another funding cycle could be. So that's if we're really successful in receiving grant funding, we'll have a lot more than $25 million in grant funding. Our council feedback was we could be more aggressive in securing grant funding. And so that number could go up, which means some of the other line items can come down.
Sure.
Just based on what's available. And it's all about trade-offs really on an ongoing basis, looking at where the opportunities are. Some projects that might be identified under the transportation impact fee right now may receive funding, a grant funding, and maybe they don't need to be supported as heavily with the transportation impact fee. The same holds true for a lot of the other funding categories. So I think this provides us with flexibility. I think what it also does is it really has helped us to identify how important coordination with our other departments and leveraging resources between all of our different projects are, and how we can look at laying out the timing of projects so that we're being really smart about how we're using public funds.
Thank you.
Suzanne?
I was interested in learning a little bit more about the synergy between the Parks and Recreation and the economic development equation. Can you give me a couple of specific examples of how that might work?
Yes, that's a good question. So the waterfront is a really good example because the waterfront really is a regional destination. We consider it to be a regional park. Not all of it's improved. The more that gets improved, the more recreation opportunities we'll have, but also the more recreation opportunities that we can lead with, the more incentive there might be for somebody to build in an area that might not be developed. So Riverwalk Park, or the Riverwalk Trail in the Bridge District, is a really good example. All the infrastructure went in first, the trail went in first. There are a few key features that went in that really helped establish a sense of place and helped to create an environment where hopefully people want to continue to invest. The Pioneer Bluff Stonelock area is another example of where the Central Park, which is the area that straddles the barge canal and where the navigation lock is, that is truly an economic development opportunity. But there's so much opportunity for the public to access waterfront. And that's also an opportunity to really build off of all of the flood protection work as well. So it's not just about park development and economic development, it's also about how park development can support economic development, can support flood development or flood protection. And to the user, they wouldn't know whether or not they were on a levee portion of a linear park or a parks portion of a linear park, or maybe they're in economic development land as part of a plaza, adjacent plaza. To the user, it's just one beautiful, continuous, unique space to enjoy. But behind the scenes, there's all of these other different efforts and benefits that are helping to drive that project. So economic development in the Central Park area is going to rely heavily on some of our park improvements to help set the stage for future development.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Moving this way. Sasha, nothing? Dave?
I just wanted to ask about, you mentioned some projects that were coming online, some pre-development agreements that were already in place, and the park impact fees were under a 10-year assumption that they would remain in place, right? There were some assumptions with the estimates that those things. Do you know, it's kind of a crystal ball question, but do you feel or know of some of those projects that are coming online? Can you expand on that? Are there some things that are definitely going to happen within 10 years? Are some of them longer than 10 years out?
Well, we were a little more general. What we did is for some of the larger development sites, we said, okay, for like River Park or Yarborough, let's assume that half of the park acreage is built. Like for Liberty, we're really pressing for the community park to be built, so we assumed that could be built, but it would happen at the very end, because that park wouldn't come online until they had enough residential development to support it. And so we just made assumptions that less than half or half of the park development may occur.
Okay.
You know, it was that general for most of the development areas. For Washington, we used the Washington Realize plan to help guide what park developments we thought might happen based on funding availability. That is a big economic development area, and that economic development is helping to drive that schedule. And then also to do the same thing for the Bridge District.
Okay, thanks.
So I think one of the things you mentioned was the survey, and for the new commissioners who weren't on board when we got those results, encourage you to take a look at those to see how we talk about trails, we talk about interconnectivity, we talked about Central Park. It's being able to get there and back without having to drive. So that's not the driver for it, but that's the other benefit of having those that interconnectivity. And then also looking at that disadvantaged community maps to be able to say, hey, well, we have a very unmet need to connect the northern part of the city to the southern part of the city, and to get people from one side to the other. And there's always talk about, here we have a limited number of bridges, limited number of lanes. How do we get people off the road and still be able to use those things? So it's looking at how that park development and how that trail development all does this big overarching goal of what we're trying to do, but also it meets the needs of that survey. And it's amazing how this goes together. And that's a great testament to the quality of the Parks Department, like you said, second to none, because when you look at that survey, it was like, not only was trails the highest desired outcome of the park survey, but it was also the highest unmet need. So it was like, we want trails and we don't have them all at the same time. And then, you go walking around, you talk to people in the community, and they're like, oh yeah, why is this all this focus on trails? And it's like, because we wanted it. We're doing exactly what the public asked to do. So looking at all that, I'm really excited to, just what I'm hearing from the school district about the projects they're looking at. And I understand you can't assume that that's gonna happen. But the way that they're talking at the school district stuff is, you see there's going to be opportunity costs. Like, if you will, you have an opportunity to do something at the old, the old James Marshall, old River City, old Westmore Oaks. If Matthew was here, he'd be able to explain that better. But that back area that's not being used, the park site at the old Westmore Oaks, now.
We call it Westmore Oaks Classic.
Yeah, Westmore Oaks Classic. To be able to use those facilities, we have to then now find a way to fund those facilities out of that $178 million that we weren't counting on, because we couldn't assume that those areas would be there. So, and just making it really, this type of planning makes it really clear to the community also that this is a 10-year process that goes into planning this. And something comes available, we can't just say, let's take the money from here and spend it there. The money's allocated based on the funding structures. We can't take money from the Bridge District and spend it at Westmore Oaks. You can't take money from Bright and spend it in Southport. So having that map was really cool. October, when we did the little points, and you showed us on the slide here with all those little points of, here's the parks, here's the boundaries of the community facility districts, here's the EFIDs, all that stuff. And it's so complicated. And if we didn't have a staff of people to do that, it's, us up here saying, hey, spend the money over there. That's not how it works. So it's really educating us on what the city can do, what we can do, and then what we should be doing based on the survey results. So it's, like I said, the big spreadsheet, here's what we want to do, here's what people told us to do, and here's what we're planning to do. And we're tracking that. So we're following along with what we say we want to do, and we're going to do what we say we're going to do. As long as we're keep tracking down that road, I think we're doing a great job. So, any other comments?
Just thanks for the effort. This was really informative for a new commissioner like myself to really understand what you've been doing, and it was really well put together, so thanks.
Thank you.
One more comment. I had made a note on the park impact fee. It's sort of like looking at it as like market economy. You have developers that want to negotiate with the city and get the least possible fees associated with their projects. And then you have the city, on the other hand, saying, we want to charge as much as we possibly can to get this development done without having them take that development money somewhere else. So it's like weighing those two policies to say, okay, we want to make money, but we don't want to deter the development. So how do we do that? The market sorts that out. And we don't see people talking about projects in West Sacramento and then pulling out of them because of the park impact fees.
Yeah.
We don't see people going, oh, yeah, we really want to do a project in West Sacramento because of the park impact. I think we're, like I said, we're looking at the market data and it's showing that we have appropriate fees. Now, the other part about it is that an opportunity to, always look at that, of course. You always have an opportunity to look at that data and see, are we charging enough for the services that are required? And I think that's where a lot of those specialty community facility districts and things that you're able to work with that developer specifically for development opportunities in their location. Because, that's where the developer's more willing to pay for an amenity. If if you're building a housing development and part of your money is going to go on the other side of town, you might not be as willing to pay for that because it's not going to benefit the sale of your houses. That make sense? So I think we're on the right track. So good job.
Thank you. And if I can add to that, all really good points. As we do try to be mindful of our fees, we want to incentivize development as best as we can, and we have looked at what would happen if we reduce our park impact fees. So you can see right now, with the information that we shared, only 20% of our park impact fee revenue is actually covering the 10-year CIP. So if we were to lower our fees, it means that we'd either need to reduce the amount of projects we have, take something off of the list, or increase funding coming from those other funding sources, which we can certainly explore. At this point in time, we feel like we need to continue on with our current fee structure and just monitor it to see how things start to shape up over the years. We can always revisit it. And so that staff recommendation is just to continue with our current fee and monitor.
Well, that's a good point also with all the funding sources. You mentioned the general fund, Measure E, Measure K, Measure N, Measure G. Those things, a lot of those are voter-approved initiatives that had specific focuses. So and there's always somebody watching. So it's like somebody's watching to see that Measure K funds are spent on kid-funded things. Measure E funds are spent on transportation-funded things. So it's like keeping those in line and knowing what you can spend the money on based on what the voters already said we should be spending the money on. So again, we have the survey saying what we need to be doing. We have the fund initiatives that are saying what we should be spending money on. We're checking all those boxes, so I think.
We're trying to.
Yeah, we're trying to. We're
think
checking
we
those
are.
boxes and doing a great job, so.
Thank you.
Good job.
And Tracy, I wanted to also thank you just as a new commissioner. Leading into this, right, we had our informational session that you provided to all the new commissioners. It really was valuable leading into this discussion tonight because we were able to come on with an informed opinion and not just be so completely raw on being exposed to the information. So I commend you and your staff on that as well.
I have to give a shout out to Paul, Katie, and Anna because they put together the PowerPoint, so thanks.
Well, thank you all.
Thanks.
All right.
All right, thank you.
I think that's it. Thank you. You're up in a second, so. Item 5, consideration of Resolution 19-1, setting the time and date for the 2019 regular meetings of the commission. Do we have a sheet that has those dates, or is that just going to be?
Item 5?
Oh, right there. Okay. No, that's the.
Yeah, I don't have that. There we go.
Here you go. Thanks.
I don't think it was in here.
It wasn't in there.
No.
So it's, we're looking at February 5th today, April 2nd, June 4th, August 6th, October 1st, December 3rd, and then February 4th, 2020. Do we need to do anything for this, or are we just announcing those dates?
That's keeping with the traditional schedule of
Yeah, and then
the first
there-
Tuesday of the even.
Occasionally,
number.
there's special meetings.
So you just make a motion to
Oh, yeah,
accept the dates?
I found it. It was on the back. My pages are all over the place over
That's okay.
All right, so we have a motion to,
I move the schedule.
all right, we have a second for that?
I'll second.
All right, so motion made to adopt a Resolution 19-1, setting the calendar by Commissioner Reed, seconded by Commissioner Eckler. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, Resolution 19.1 has passed, setting the time and date for the regular meetings for the remainder of the term. All right, now we are on to General Administration Function Part 2, 6A Director's Report. So there you are, already up at the podium.
I am ready.
You can do this from the desk too if you want to.
I could, but I always feel weird talking from the side where I can see everybody a lot better.
Can't
from
be on
here. I was
TV over
already
there
here.
either. The camera doesn't.
That's true. Good point. As the new Parks and Recreation Director, I just wanted to say that I'm really excited to be working with you on what promises to be very busy few years. The mayor touched on some of the projects that are currently underway. If we're really successful, like I hope and believe that we can be with securing a lot of grant funding, we'll have a lot of new projects as well. Right now, we have our Memorial Park ADA upgrade project underway. It's in design, getting ready to start construction in the spring. We have street frontage improvements that are starting this week at Heritage Oaks Park, so adding the sidewalks so that you can walk actually around Lake Washington and Village Parkway. We are working with Clutterwald on the ropes course project. They have a little bit of a delay, but we're working with them to get that project back up on track. And as I mentioned, the Parks Master Plan, which really provides the roadmap for us. Hopefully, we'll be wrapping that up in a few months. I did want to let you know that I have a few grant projects that I wanted to update you on. The first is the Habitat Conservation Fund Grant Program. This program is in its final year. We applied 2 years ago for the second to the last round for funding to purchase a piece of property to serve as a trailhead for the new Southport Levee Trail that will basically be the levee. You know, the unpaved trail on top of the levee. We know people are anxiously awaiting the opportunity to use it. They're probably out there already using it, even though they're not supposed to be. So building amenities near levee trails is really important because you can't do anything on the levee itself. You can't put any structures on the levee. And so you can pave the trail, but you really can't put in shade structures or drinking fountains. And so having amenities adjacent to the trail to provide access and support is really important. So we received grant funding to acquire the property. And we, last month, council approved the land acquisition, the purchase and sale agreement, and our grant contract with state parks. So we are moving forward and hopefully we'll close escrow this month and we'll have ourselves a piece of property that will become a future trailhead. We also applied for the last round of the same grant program for funding to construct the trailhead. That grant application is in review right now. This spring, we will find out if we're awarded the $460,000 that we requested. That has a 50-50 match requirement. So it's about $1 million project, and the most that we could request from them was 50% of the project costs. Next week, we will be submitting a concept proposal for another grant opportunity called the Cultural, Community, and Natural Resources Grant Program. It's funded with Prop 68. And it really covers a broad spectrum of projects, but it includes athletic fields. And so we thought it was a really good opportunity for Bright Park to continue to move with the completion of the master plan. It prioritizes disadvantaged communities. It has no match requirement. And if we're successful, then we will be selected to formally submit an application several months from now. So this is just the first step. This week, the Prop 68 statewide park program became available to $255 million in this round for new park development or park renovations. Again, we think that there are a number of projects that could be eligible, but Bright Park is also a really good candidate. For this particular round of this program being offered by the state is a very short performance period because the performance period started the date that that Prop 68 passed, basically, and now just getting the grant application out. And so all projects have to be completed by mid-2022, which means projects that are already designed, that already have the environmental clearance, that are in disadvantaged communities are going to be the most competitive projects. We have a lot of work already done for Bright Park, so we think that that might be a really good candidate for this grant program. But this program and many of the others that are coming out have very extensive community engagement effort requirements. So we will have to outline our community engagement activities and be really smart about how we engage the community, and hopefully have the commission's help with this, because it can be very confusing for the community when you have a lot of different outreach efforts. And if we can focus them so that we can achieve our outreach goals for multiple grant applications at the same time, that will be, a good way to move forward. So we'll be working through that. And I should have some more information for you by your next meeting. The mayor mentioned the City Council Strategic Planning Session is later this week. That will help guide our direction for the coming year. So I'm sure you'll be hearing back from the mayor and council on that, but we will also report back on that at a future commission meeting. I wanted to mention that my former position, the business manager position for the Parks and Rec Department, they will be advertising for that in the coming weeks. So if you know anybody that has a strong track record of applying for, receiving grant funds, has planning and project management experience, please encourage them to look out for that posting. And then two more items quickly. The mayor's commission orientation is scheduled for February 19th at 4 p.m. I think that's still scheduled. The mayor didn't mention that, but I just wanted to make sure that was on your calendars. And then lastly, as I mentioned in my presentation for the Parks and Open Space Master Plan update, we are hoping to have the draft report to council in March. This commission does not meet again until April, and I wanted to see if a special meeting would be possible, possibly on March 5th, if you're available. And so I'd like to put that out there for your consideration. We can certainly follow up with you via email. And it may be that if delays occur in the planning effort, we might not need to do that, but I thought I would just make a plug for it in case.
March 19th, you said?
March
5th.
March 5th for this potential special meeting. February 19th is the orientation.
Mixed them up, okay. March 5th.
I would definitely say follow up with, because there's 3 of us missing as well, is to quickly follow up with the email for the March 5th meeting.
Okay. All right. That concludes my report. Thank you.
I see that item 6B for future item requests is still on here. That shouldn't be on here according to the direction I got, at least when we were redoing the commission orientation packets, that the commissioners, only people that could put items on the agenda would be City Council and the Parks Department Director. Is that still correct?
We will find out for next
Okay.
meeting.
So let's not do
I
any
did not get that information.
future item requests, and certainly if we have things that come up, like our normal communications with the department, we can talk to you guys at that time. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Could I?
Go ahead,
Have
sorry.
a comment first? Not ignoring what you just said, however, just putting it out there, that at some point, I'd love to get a presentation on the status of the implementation of the age-friendly city plan. So, just putting it on the record.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion to adjourn by Commissioner Eckler, seconded by Commissioner Reed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.